Alright, we've gotten through Sonic X Shadow Generations and Sonic Movie 3, so now it is finally time to get back into my series where I talk about what I would do if I got to recreate Sonic Forces. Hello everyone, I'm OCDsaster, and this is OCDsaster Blue, my Sonic exclusive channel, where everything we do here has to be about the Blue Blur himself. So if that sounds like something your speed, consider checking out some other videos after this one and subscribing to the channel. It really does help. To catch you up, this series is about what I would do if I got to remake Sonic Forces, because there's certain foundational elements of the game that I did enjoy. I just think the overall execution was completely botched, and I have a lot of really cool and creative ideas that would really make this story shine, because overall, the story ain't half bad. So in part 1, we talked about the overall issues I have with the original game. Part 2, I talked about the story and the tweaks and stuff that I would change to make it better. And in this part, we're going to be diving even deeper, where I talk about the mission and level structures for the game that I would hypothetically be making. As I mentioned in the last video, my version of Sonic Forces would actually have Sonic MIA for the first half of the game. This would be a 3-act structure, so that means the prologue in Act 1, there would be no playing or seeing Sonic at all. Everyone will be wondering where he is, and there would be some undertones of everyone believing that he is deceased, but we will not actually get to play or see him until Act 2 and the final act, where he will be mostly dominant, so that way we can feel the overall power of Sonic, and it's still also a Sonic game. First, let's talk about the levels in my Sonic Forces. In the original Sonic Forces, the levels were far too short. Once you finally got your groove and really started to appreciate the level, boom, you were hit with the goal and it was done. Each stage was only like a minute and a half to 2 minutes tops, and it was just really rushed and really short. And I believe a lot of this was due to the lack of development time they had for the game. In my version, these levels would be more akin to the Shadow Generations length, at an average about 3.5 minutes, with the maximum being more around that 7.5 minute mark. Like Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, my levels or stages would be mission based, and I have a few mission types that I'd like to discuss with you. The more complicated one would be the 06 mission types. Listen, I know what everyone says about Sonic 06, but with Project 06 out there, it proves that the game had the potential to be really good. So what are 06 missions in my game? 06 missions would basically be, you play as 3 characters in one stage or level. You start off with a character, you get to a section where you have to play as another to open up something for that character to get through, and it's more of a collaborative effort. These would be the least amount of levels and stages in my game, but they would be here. So when you hear me say 06 mission, that means there's 3 characters working tentatively in one bigger level to get through. So these would be more in the 7.5 minute length stages. Classic missions are not what you think. Like I said, I am completely axing Classic Sonic from my version of Sonic Forces. Instead, Classic would now be the boost formula, because when you think about it, it is kind of classic nowadays. The thing has been around for over a decade. So the classic missions would be just you playing as a speedster, whether it's Sonic, Shadow, quicker levels where you're boosting to get to the goal ring. Then we would have the Horde missions, where you would play as essentially a power type character, Vector, Knuckles, Omega, and you would actually fight waves of enemies in like an arena-like area. So they would just keep having enemy types come out at you, and you would have to battle your way through to clear the stage. Next we have stealth missions, in which the player would control like Espio or Rouge and have to stealth their way through a stage or area in an 06 mission in order to open up part of the stage or to complete the stage, getting access codes, stealing Chaos Emeralds, something of that nature. Then we have the Avatar missions, which will actually be a collection of all these other mission types. He will be the only character in my version of Sonic Forces that will have different levels where he can do all these different missions. That's what makes him unique. I said in a previous video, you're only going to have your one avatar, which is true, but he's able to do these multifaceted things to make him unique to this game. My version of Sonic Forces would also have boss fights. They would be Chaos, Metal Sonic, Zavik, Shadow, Infinite, and Eggman, but my version is you can play as other characters than just Sonic and the Avatar to fight them, and then later you'll fight them again as Sonic. So that kind of makes it also a power thing, where you will fight these bosses as these other characters, but you'll actually lose. That'll just show how strong they are, But then when you play as Sonic later, that proves how detriment Sonic is to the story and how he really needs to be there in order to help save the day. So in total, my Sonic Forces game would have 32 levels and 13 boss fights. You would play as Sonic for 12 of these levels and 7 of those 13 boss fights as well. The prologue to the game would have you play 5 levels and 1 infinite boss fight, where you play as Shadow, Rouge, and Omega in mostly 06 type missions, but you'll also get 2 classic booster formula missions as Shadow as well. And Shadow will fight Infinite, and Infinite will defeat the whole team and capture them. We will then move into Act 1, where there will be 10 levels and 5 bosses. There's no Shadow, no Rouge, no Omega, because they've all been captured. You will have a few levels as Sonic, and then he gets captured. Then, for the rest of Act 1, you'll be playing as Knuckles, the Avatar, Silver, Espio, Vector, Amy, and Blaze. There will be adventure missions, there will be fighter missions, avatar missions. There will be 4 specific avatar missions, and you will fight Shadow, Chaos, Metal Sonic, Zavik, and Infinite with all these characters, and you will basically lose. In the game, you'll defeat them, but in the cutscene after defeating them in the fight, they'll overpower you, and you'll see like that meter of Eggman's empire rising, and the, Sonic Forces, the rebels, diminishing to kind of give you that sense of like doom, that what you're doing isn't necessarily working. Notice how Tails isn't mentioned here, because Tails is gonna, grieve Sonic and go missing, so Tails isn't a part of this. And there isn't any like fly type, character missions as well, because the only other person I really think fits into this for this story would be like Cream, and also Charmathy B, who I hate with an absolute passion and refuse to give him any mission type or plot significance whatsoever. If he has to be in my game, he'll be maybe 2 dialogue boxes, and that's it. He's an annoying bee. He's the worst character in every Sonic game, and I hope he just gets squished! Anyway, I went over more of the plot in the last video for this series, so I'm going to make this quick. But essentially, the prologue is Team Dark taking out Eggman bases and working with Gun, but then they get defeated by Infinite and the Phantom Ruby shenanigans, and then they get captured for a good portion of the game. Then Sonic goes and gets defeated a few weeks later, and then he gets captured and disappears, Tails disappears, and then you actually get a lot of time in my version of Sonic Forces actually playing as the rebels and trying to make a change and make a difference. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, as you're trying to take out Eggman forces and bases. The Phantom Ruby clones are taking you out. Then, towards the end of the Act 1, you will save Sonic, you will rescue him along with Shadow and everybody, and then we move into Act 2, which would have 12 levels and 5 boss fights where you're playing between everyone. You have all mission types, you get 3 Sonic exclusive like classic mission types, and you're fighting all the bosses again. But now that you're Sonic, you're actually getting some momentum and defeating the Phantom Ruby clone bosses. The final act would contain 15 levels and 2 boss fights, being Eggman and Infinite at a much stronger scale. These are like the final bosses. You would play as Sonic, Avatar, and Shadow. They would be the main 3 that you would be playing as for this section. And then Infinite and Eggman, as I said, they'll be the final boss fights. And then there would be 2 adventure missions where you play as absolutely everyone. So that'd be like the final 2 levels, where like you're playing as the whole cast. So it's going to be a much bigger, larger thing going on there, just to show the cohesion, show that everyone's working together. Tails is working on comms with Cream and Charm. And if you're wondering why Big the Cat has not been mentioned, it's because he's far too grand in the Sonic universe to really be blessed in this timeline, because he would actually just snap his fingers and the world would be saved. It's like the Superman problems in the comics, where the writers always have to have an excuse for why Superman is off planet during some of these threats, because someone will just go, well, why didn't Superman just fly in and save the day? Because he's so powerful. It's the same thing with Big. He has to be off doing something else with Froggy, because if he was here in the story, everything would be done in like 2 seconds. Infinite would be absolutely demolished. Eggman's empire would not even have a chance of starting, and we wouldn't have a story. So that's why Big the Cat is sadly not in this. Alright, so that was the basic overview of these missions and level types. Now I'm going to be a little bit more specific so you can get a better idea of what I'm envisioning for these levels. First off, all of the stages from the original Sonic Forces game, get them out of here. It doesn't make sense. We're actually going to be doing a lot of stages that look and theme off of Sonic Unleashed, believe it or not, because Sonic Unleashed takes place all around the world, and so does Sonic Forces. So we're going to actually do a lot of pulling from those games and maybe add in some stuff as well. So you'll have all these different types of terrain and citizens and stuff like that. I'm not saying there's going to be a hub world or anything like that. I think that might be a little bit too much to add into the Sonic game, although I would love it. I would love to have a hub world to travel to. We're going to try to make this a little bit more realistic. So with that out of the way, yeah, when I'm talking about these levels and stages, picture like Antarctica or the jungle or a desert area, stuff like that. But more realistic and more worldly, globally. Globally? That's not a word. I'm not going to go too far into what the classic mission structure looks like because we've all seen the modern Sonic boosting mechanic, right? It's just that is what that mission type would be. Sonic, Shadow, and the Avatar would be the three characters that do the classic type missions, where you're boosting through, using homing attacks, and stuff like that, grinding. You get the picture. When it comes to the fighter missions, just picture a large arena area and just mobs of enemies, waves of enemies coming in, spawning in. Once you defeat a certain amount, you will have, a move set of first and secondary attacks, a special attack, and then a meter will fill up, and if you fill up the meter, you have a overall ultimate attack that you can use. And the more you're playing in the game, the harder the enemy types are, and the quantity of enemies are more and more and more. So that's basically what the fighter type is. Knuckles, Omega, Amy, Silver, these would all be characters that would be in the fighter missions, because I just see their movesets more akin to bashing and smashing versus boosting through a stage. Stealth missions would be a completely different style than we've seen in a Sonic game. Yes, in Sonic Heroes, there were the missions where you would play as Team Chaotix and you would be SBO and go invisible and run through a regular stage. But in my head, the stages for my Sonic Forces would actually focus on designing a level that's more akin to a Last of Us, or God forbid, the Mary Jane sections in the Spider-Man PS5 games. As much as I hate those, it would be better, but just the structure and layout of trying to get through, and if you're not stealthy enough, you can take down a few enemies, but if you get detected too much or make too much noise, you're going to lose the mission. And I have SBO and Rouge being the two stealth mission characters, because that just makes sense, and they could be doing a different amount of tasks. One mission could be taking out a certain amount of enemies quietly, another could be getting access codes to something or breaking into a vault and stealing something. I just think that's very akin to those types of characters. Avatar missions, you just gotta picture your avatar doing all these other missions, really, because that's what it would be. If it's just a solo avatar mission, it could be a toss-up. If it's a classic mission, a fighter mission, or a stealth mission, they can be used interchangeably, basically is what I'm trying to say. And lastly, the 06 mission type, where it would just be a glorified giant mega level where all these missions are not all, I would say 3 of these missions are put together and sectioned off to keep going through the level. So a wave ocean from Sonic 06 kind of thing, or the final level in Sonic 06 where you're playing as Knuckles and Rouge and Omega and everybody. So those are the mission types for my Sonic Forces game that I will never make, but just think it's a really fun thought experiment. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you like these missions? Do you like what characters are connected to what missions? And do you have any better ideas? I would love to hear them and steal them for content. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. But I would like to see your ideas and what you think of mine. Your feedback is always important to me. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm OCDsaster, and I hope you have a super Sonic rest of your day. See ya.